to present his paper on ensuring maritime investment in Nigeria, opportunity in crude oil trade. Can we give him a round of applause, please?
Thank you very much, moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Akinlolu. I'm the head of Oil and Gas and Special Risk in AXA Mansard, Nigeria. And permit me to please stand on existing established protocols. I will first start by thanking the organizers of this. Excellent. Organizers of this event for this opportunity, which is given for stakeholders, industry leaders to bring to the fore the issues that affect indigenous participation. The issues that affect insurance, as you will see in the slides that come, are not particularly different from the issues that affect other indigenous players. But I think the first step is to bring the issues to the fore. We make it a talking point. We begin to lobby, and then hopefully we can then begin to get traction and obviously lead to improvement in job creation as well as improvement in the economy of the country. The topic I'm here to share with you, I'm just put together a few slides. The slides contain a number of data, basic global data and local data, just to put the issues into context before we then talk about the as it affects ensuring maritime investment in Nigeria. And then I'll quickly then dive into opportunities for crude oil trade. I'll be guided by the following outline. We will look very quickly at the global data, maritime industry. We'll look at what the trends are, what the opportunities are, what the outlooks are for 2018 and possibly in the medium term, short to medium term. And then I'll take an overview of the Nigerian maritime industry, and then talk about insurance, the role insurance plays in this sector, the opportunities for crude oil transports, and then we'll take the closing remarks. I'll try as much as possible to be fast as possible. I understand I have 20 minutes, so I'll just move quickly. I have less than 20 minutes. Oh, okay, so I'll try and put it together. Okay, so I put up, I don't know how clear this is from the people at the back, but this is basically global industry facts and figures. The industry is faced very difficult, harsh winds in the last couple of years, particularly in 2015 and 2016, when the global trade industry declined. It has since rebounded in 2017, and leading that growth has been Africa and as well as, I think there's a pointer here, Africa and Oceania. Africa is the column in yellow. You can see that Africa grown, you can't see as much, but it's grown largely 18%. Even though the contribution to global trade isn't as much as you can, but there is opportunities abound. Of course, global merchandise volumes also improve 11% globally, world data. And then, of course, China, the US, and Germany continue to be the major contributor to global trade. Three of those countries accounting for close to about 30% of global trading, merchandise trading all. Asia and America continue to lead the way. In terms of global carriers, APM Maersk continues to be the dominant leader, global leader in that carrier sector, contributing about 18.7% to the carrier market. Market outlook for 2018, the market outlook is expected to grow 4.4% in 2018. That is on the back of 3.7% growth, which we expect in GDP numbers. We know as the growth and economy always follow themselves. As the economy improves, trade and merchandise also improves as well with it. And both also, as the economy begins to decline, as we saw in the past year, especially for Nigerian data, trade also has declined. We expect factor 4% growth in 2019, and that's a dip in terms of the projections of 4.4, which we are projecting for 2018. And that's because the economy itself, global economy, is expected to slow down somewhat from 3.7 to 3.1. Index of export orders recently released in the first quarter show that trade merchandise has been slowing down, possibly because of the, we have to continue to monitor the trade discussions that are ongoing between the US and Canada, US and China. You know, the U.S. government has been come up with a lot of policies ostensibly to protect U.S. interest and U.S. trade, and that has come in contrast with China's policy on trade. And so there are fears that there might be a trade war, but whether that will, how well that will materialize remains to be seen, but it's worth mentioning. In terms of 2018, what are the outlook like? We expect career consolidations to continue to improve. In 2016, we noticed that the United Arab Shipping Company merged with Lloyd to form the 5th largest carrier in the world. We've seen a lot of consolidations and partnership. We also had 2M merging also as well with Hyundai Maritime Group, which and largely because the industry is a highly capital intensive one, size matters, and as cost continues to be a major talking point. The bigger you go, the better you can manage your cost. And so we are not surprised when we begin to see mergers and alliances in this sector. And of course, the issues of overcapacity continues to remain. We now have a lot of supply and very huge demand. That is also contributing to cost pressures on these carriers, and that continues to we need to watch on that. And freight rates, the issues about rates, local rates have been growing, international freight rates as well has been growing, and this has continued to put pressure on these companies to continue to remain as efficient as possible, and that's why we can see a lot of consolidations in that sector to go bigger. Now, I've talked about global. I think we just move quickly to Nigerian maritime data. That's the brief profile of Nigeria. 180 million population, GDP of 404 billion, coastal line of about 853 kilometers. That buttresses the fact that the maritime sector continues to remain a very important sector in the country. And of course, in 2016, we saw that we had a trade imbalance where imports basically exceeded exports, which is what we don't want. But I think in 2017 the numbers have turned. We've not had more export, but all the exports largely have been led by crude oil commodity exports. What we would like Nigeria to be a major exporter, like the DG, the Deputy Comptroller General of Customs also mentioned. It is important for us to continue to invest in exporting finished products rather than commodities. And so it will be nice as the Dangote refinery comes on board, if that can improve our capacity to export refined product as opposed to importing just crude. Market overview, how do we see it? This basically just talk about the value chain, the various players in that sector. We have terminal operators, and I think these are things that you guys possibly already know. Vessel owners and supply services. We have shipping agents, both local shipping agents as well as also foreign shipping agents. Then we have then logistics as well as bases, of which we looked at Niger Dock, which is one of those foremost in logistic base, and we saw some of the very interesting things that have been happening to Niger Dock, and some of the big capabilities which some of us, so particularly I didn't know they had as much of those capabilities in Nigeria. Of course, the environment is a very regulated environment. Mansard continues to play a huge role in that. The NPA, of course, which are also here, play a huge role in Inland Waterways Authority, Nigeria Shipper Council, are some of the regulators which we have in that sector. I won't spend so much time on these slides. Basically just talks about some of the companies which are already existing, some of these sectors, some of these companies you're already familiar with. And then very quickly at the market updates in terms of as it affects the various sectors. For shipping agents, we've had issues about there's been an increased focus on export. The government has been doing a lot of work to promote exports, and we know that crude oil prices have rebounded, and of course exports have grown in that line. But of course the government is also doing a lot of work promoting agricultural export, and the numbers which you've seen so far have shown that agric exports have continued to include, and I think shipping agents are also now beginning to focus export as a means to get FX. We've also seen increase in tariffs. We looked at some of those issues earlier. Tariff increase is increasing, the custom charges are increasing, freight charges are increasing, and these are some of the things we've seen in that sector. For terminal operators, we've also seen an increase in terminal handling charges, which it's expected as the economy continues to. In fact, we just came back from recession. In that time of recession, companies try to throw afloat, and some of the ways they throw afloat is to try and transfer some of these costs to customers and all that. Then we've seen movements of cargo to bonded terminals for eases of accessibility. We've seen cargo bonded terminals open in Ikeja. We've seen also opening in Ibadan, as far as in Ibadan as well. Basically just to ease movement of cargo. In terms of vessel owners, marine assets acquisition continues to be a talk of the day, because marine assets are very expensive assets, and there have been talks about various intervention funds which the government is in place. We talked about the cabotage vessel financing fund earlier on, and how well that has not been working, and we hope that as those issues are being discussed today, stakeholders can go back and try and see how best to make these things work. For terminal, for logistics basis, government have been working very hard to try and open up that sector. We know we have a very big player in that sector. There has been effort by the government to open up that sector to other players. And of course, the role of the Nigerian Content Fund as well as BOI funds to try and encourage local participants in that sector. Emerging trends, what do we see? In terms of terminal operators, we can see that there are new ports in Badagry, which Ladol is working heavily on, as well as the Lekki Free Trade Zone, which was commissioned a couple of weeks, about 3 or 4 weeks ago by the Vice President of the country. We've seen development in inland dry ports, which I mentioned earlier, and of course of reconcentrating of terminals, particularly from the old to the new existing terminals. And we have Warri 2 and Kirikiri lighter terminals as one of those examples. For shipping agents, I've mentioned about the trend of mergers. It's happening globally, it's also happening locally as well. And then migrations to larger carriers, basically to try and manage increased costs in that environment. For vessel owners, there's been some award of contract to freshwater contracts, which seeks to improve pricing. Of course, the increased joint venture partnership between locals and IOCs. The government is doing a lot of work to try and encourage local players. I think largely what we need to continue to focus on is the enforcement of these laws. There are enabling regulations that encourage local participation, but I think where we need to improve upon is in the areas of enforcement. This basically talks about some of the players across all the sector, and I'm glad that to see that some of the participants of this occasion are also very prominent. So prominently, we have Niger Dock in the logistics base. Although is not here. We've also had Stars engineer Bofun talk to us earlier in the day. Now I've talked so much about the industry. Now let's talk very briefly about insuring marine assets. Maritime needs cuts across various sectors, and I think I'm not here to come and deliver a lecture on marine insurance. We know what this covers. We know there's cargo insurance. We know there's marine liability insurance in terms of when you damage the environment, damage third-party property. Now we also talk about hull and machinery for some of the vessels which we've seen, or offshore patrol vessels and offshore support vessels, which we've talked about earlier. Then we also talk about protection and indemnity, which is also available in the sector. Of course, there are PI clubs all around, and that also tries to provide that. Insurance also seeks to provide additional in case the PI clubs limits are limited. And of course, we have emerging special risk, which is coming up apart from the basic vanilla products which we've been seeing in insurance industry. Now, marine cargo insurance basically covers movement of goods from one place to the other. And I dare say that everything here has been cargo at some point. This building was not here perhaps 20 years ago. So it was here 20 years ago. Maybe it was here 50 years ago. So if it wasn't 50 years ago, that means at some point the things that brought up this building were cargoed here. So at some point, everything here possibly was cargoed at some point. And that continues to buttress the importance of cargo. And there are various types of cargo. They come in comprehensive versions, which we call the institute cargo, and then down to bulk oil, specifically designed for wet cargo, petroleum products. And then we also have the institute cargo clause for air, where the cargo is meant to be brought in by air. But largely all these are just variants of a simple product, which is marine cargo. And I dare say that marine cargo insurance is actually the first insurance service provided in the world. It was one of the first